everybody to the Detonated YouTube channel. I wanted to put together this bonus video just going over the aftermath of the Black Ops 7 reveal and responding to as much community feedback as I can. Obviously, I'll be elaborating even more live on the Bombshell podcast, which, as of recording this, will end up being later today over on my main channel, but let's start with the fact that Black Ops 2 and 3 are regarded as arguably the best Call of Duty titles in the entire franchise. Obviously, still up for debate, that's totally subjective, but I find it ironic that Black Ops 7 so far, from what has been shown, looks like a hybrid between BO2 and 3, and also takes some great elements from BO4, even BO6, put all that together, and that's Black Ops 7. The fact that people are complaining about that before even playing it, I think it's a bit ironic. Now, I get it though, Black Ops 6 was thought to be the game that I think we're about to get with BO7. That's almost a discussion for another time about back-to-back titles under the same sub-series. I don't think we'll ever see that again, but compared to the transition from MW2 to 3, I think the transition between BO6 to 7 will be a night and day difference. I really do think the jump from the 90s era game to 2035 is going to be pretty dramatic, to where a lot of folks out there, minus Carry Forward, are probably going to forget that these games came out back-to-back. Now, speaking of Carry Forward, I will say this. I totally understand that people want to stay immersed in the futuristic theme this game is going for. I mean, as I just said, this game is taking what I think is the best of BO2 and 3 and sprinkling some elements of BO4 and 6, and that's Black Ops 7. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of Infinite Warfare multiplayer a couple of years back, but that's probably because it came out just after BO3, and same goes for Zombies. I was just still hooked on BO3 for its second and third years of support, but Infinite Warfare multiplayer was gorgeous, and I'm getting the vibe of IW from some of these shots of the multiplayer that we got. But the thing is, right, with Carry Forward, by Season 1, I suppose, you're going to end up seeing Black Ops 6 operators and weapons. Now, the blog post did mention there'll be some exceptions to this. When I was over at the studio, they didn't really elaborate what those exceptions would be, but it was told to us that, yeah, they're aware of the conversations happening in the community about too many wacky skins, cel-shaded crossovers. So what I'm guessing could happen is that because Carry Forward isn't necessarily dropping till Season 1, that gives them more time to hopefully incorporate a filter so that people out there that don't want to see Black Ops 6 operators or just cel-shaded, wacky, non-milsim skins, people may be able to toggle a setting on which will remove the visibility of some of that content. So let's see how they handle it. If it doesn't end up being the case, though, and we don't see a skin filter, all I could say is that it's probably just higher ups at Activision or Microsoft who say, hey, why would we want to prevent people from seeing content that is already selling pretty well? Why would we want to hurt the bottom line by preventing people from seeing said cosmetic? That's something, again, more from a business standpoint. Not saying I agree with that either. I'm just saying, hey, when it comes to Carry Forward, I think it makes sense for back-to-back titles as a part of the same sub-series, but it's not like I'm really going to be running any of the Black Ops 6 weapons anyway within BO7, and probably not even in Warzone next year, because there'll be so much we're working on for the new weapon prestige system and the new gunsmith that we're going to have in Black Ops 7, right? Being able to max out a weapon at level 250, but the footage that we're seeing from the direct, at least, really seems a lot more promising than what we saw last year, and I get it though. Black Ops 6 was thought to be the game that we're about to get. I think there were a lot of expectations, considering we had just come off MW3's gold standard for live service support. There was a lot of expectations that Black Ops 6 would just follow through with almost everything MW3 did, if not better. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. It felt like a step back for live service support, seasonal events, rewards. Black Ops 7, however, is coming in to answer to all that feedback. Now, the comment sections, right? I have to address the comment sections. After the Black Ops 7 reveal trailer, the direct, after content creators posted all the videos, the comment sections are flooded with Battlefield 6, Battlefield 6. The one thing I'll say is I find it funny that when Battlefield 6 was getting revealed a couple of weeks ago, the comments at the time were flooded with, don't pre-order, play it first. So I guess all those people love the beta, which, fair enough, I really enjoyed it as well for the little time I got to play it. I guess they're all pre-ordering now, and the comment sections are now flooded with Call of Duty's dead, it's over, Battlefield 6 takeover. But Call of Duty and Battlefield are such different experiences. As I tweeted out, Black Ops 7, from the get-go, has already announced so many different progression systems that I don't think Battlefield 6 will ever have. I think at most, you'll see extra weapons and maps and modes added with every major content drop in Battlefield 6. Maybe there'll be one camo system. Who knows? We're not really sure what's up with the progression. Nothing was really announced as far as progression, to be quite honest with you, but with Black Ops 7, we're talking 16 mastery camos during the launch window, weapon prestige, weekly challenges, so many features that are building upon what works so well with MW3 to where I'm like, what are we comparing here? They're just apples and oranges at this point. But some folks will say that's cope because I don't want to admit Battlefield 6 took over the Call of Duty HQ numbers over on Steam, which to me is irrelevant anyway. As I also mentioned on Twitter before, I think by the time you get around to spring and GTA 6 is coming out, I think the comment sections are going to flip. For every FPS game, for any game out there, everyone's going to be like, hey, you're watching Fortnite? Hey, you're watching Dead by Daylight? Hey, you're watching COD? GTA 6 is the end-all, be-all. No other game could exist, apparently. Even though GTA 6 will come out halfway through the Black Ops 7 cycle, so what, season 3 or 4? And then 6-7 months later, Modern Warfare 4 comes out, which, on the name alone, will break the internet. So these games can coexist. I think it's ridiculous that everyone's really immature. Not everybody, but you know what I mean. I think it's ridiculous that so many comment sections are that immature, where apparently people can't enjoy or play multiple games, or apparently games can't have different directions they're going in, different focuses on live service or, campaign, whatever the case is. Now, as far as the reveal of Black Ops 7, I also want to mention this real quick because just as it's been for previous years where creators get flown out along with the press early in like June or whenever throughout the summer, people aren't able to share their impressions on that event. They're only able to share details from the briefing whenever an embargo lifts, which usually is at around the same time a blog post drops, a reveal trailer. I still think there's confusion, and I understand this. I still think there's confusion with how the embargo works. Content creators were able to play. We're just not able to share what we played, but I can tell you this. At every event that I've been to, or probably any other COD creator has been to, feedback is always given right there. As people are sitting and playing or through an email later on, feedback is always given on what was played. It just cannot be shared what was experienced and what was played, but usually by the time a COD Next rolls around or a beta, that's when creators or the press start giving their impressions on the current build of the multiplayer. They don't really go backwards and talk about an older build they played. They talk about all things forward. So that's how the embargo works. But I think there's a flaw with that. And I've relayed this feedback to as many people as I could. I also think it never gets old when you see comments from people claiming that creators are glazing the new Call of Duty just because they were invited to an event where they got to play it early. I mean, first off, I can't think of a single creator that would strategically change the trajectory of their content just for a trip or two every single year. Now, I'm sure every creator, including myself, that goes to these events are grateful and humbled by the opportunity to work with Call of Duty, to lift an embargo and talk about things ahead of time because it helps with the content, helps with the scheduling, helps with the flow, of course. But every creator I've ever seen at an event is always, and I mean always, talking to as many studio and executive folks as possible to relay feedback, to talk about things their community has been talking about, to provide insight on maybe a different perspective surrounding the gameplay. And it doesn't mean that because a creator talked about these things at an event that's guaranteed to be implemented. I'm sure things are considered, talked about at a board meeting, but sometimes certain feedback could be disregarded, or some executive higher up is like, you know what, I'm going to override that. I'm going to veto that. We're just not going to do it. Who knows? But it's just crazy every single year. People are like, oh, you were paid. I'm like, nobody was paid. Nobody has shared an opinion on the actual gameplay. Creators were just able to, in an early fashion, talk about the big briefing and the blog post and info that was also presented at the Direct. Now, we'll probably never see the day where somebody who's covering the new game isn't labeled a shill. Because somebody was fortunate enough to cover a game full time, apparently that means they're glazing the game. Clearly, the person who's covering the game full time enjoys what they do. I'm also talking about myself in that regard too. I enjoy Call of Duty. I have been enjoying the franchise for a very long time, and I'm honored to be able to do this full time. That's because I do like the game. That comes with doing this full time. There's probably folks out there that don't like the game, but grift and rage bait on it. Whole different conversation for a different video. Yeah, the embargo lift. Info was shared from select creators and the press. And simultaneously, as that embargo lifts, the Gamescom panel had just concluded for Black Ops 7, which gave us a limited viewing of the Direct, which instead of being 17 minutes, which it actually is, the Gamescom panel only gave us like less than 10 minutes of that. So I think a lot of people, including myself, weren't aware that the full Direct was then posted on the COD channel with even more context to what creators and the press were able to share, and more context from what was shared at Gamescom. Then there was a giant blog that also dropped with other new images and other bits of details that weren't really talked about at all in the Direct or in content creator briefings. Then there was like a small COD Pod segment at Gamescom as well. There was just so many sources where information was coming from. The feedback I've relayed is that I think for future reference with events like this and embargo lifts, I think it should be the case where creators in the press have as many assets as possible that are close to the blog post or the direct. In a perfect world, access to early footage, but I get why they don't do that because it's probably too risky to let the trailer be out there for an extra day or two before it's officially released. In a perfect world, creators in the press have more access to assets to better explain and convey what exactly is coming to the game so that there's less places where info is coming from on the big info dump. Because how many folks out there didn't know there was an extended direct on the COD channel or didn't know there was a giant blog post with more images than the creators and the press had access to for their embargo lift? Now, because you can't share impressions on the gameplay that you experienced, I feel like if anything, this impacts the zombie-only creators the most. I'm not a zombie-only creator, but there were a handful of them at the Treyarch event a couple weeks ago. So because they're probably only going to cover zombies and because they couldn't share impressions of what they played, they had very little info to work with to talk about from the briefing since the full zombies reveal isn't until early September. So I think that hurt a little bit when the creators are trying to cover the little info that they were given about zombies, but they can't go into too much detail because some of the details include impressions on what they experienced. So I think if anything, zombies got hurt the most from that restriction. But when it comes to multiplayer or the campaign, so much was revealed in the briefing that it was fine to not be able to share impressions on what was played over at the studio, if that makes sense. Now, in all, I think it is going to be tough for people to call Black Ops 7 a DLC to BO6 the way they called MW3 a DLC to MW2. Looking back at MW3 for a second, though, I think it's funny that that game got absolutely review bombed because of the campaign. The multiplayer was kind of lukewarm upon launch. It was all remastered maps, but once the live service support started, it blew every COD out the water for how to do live service Call of Duty. And the reviews just don't reflect that for Modern Warfare 3. But for anybody to call Black Ops 7 a DLC is almost without saying MW3 was somehow a DLC, even though it genuinely wasn't because of the support that it got alone. So even if Black Ops 7 is super close to MW3 during the launch window, it's going to end up being a Modern Warfare 3 situation, I want to say, a couple seasons in, where everyone's like, wow, this is a Call of Duty that everybody's dreamed of and thought that Black Ops 6 was going to be, but we just had to wait a little bit longer, unfortunately, for what is probably going to be one of the best updated CODs that we've ever gotten. But that's going to do it for me, folks. I know people probably want to hear more about the anti-cheat or skill-based matchmaking, lobbies expanding. We'll probably get more info on all of that closer to November, but for now, as far as what has been revealed content-wise, I think we're in for a really strong release. With that being said, I will catch you guys in the next one.